Hello and welcome wherever you're listening to and watching episode 6 of 2020 Coaching Convos, as usual with me, Julie Crabb. Thank you as ever for joining me on this second series called Passionately Curious. I'm exploring questions and ideas about the language and jargon of coaching. I'm curious to get clearer and deeper understanding for myself and for you and for others, to really integrate what I've been taught and what I've learned and what I've adopted as a coach. And you'll know by now it's important to me and the original purpose of this podcast to find ways that coaching can be made available to all who want to make use of it. For some reason that makes me think of Vision On. Anyway, to find out more about the background to this episode, where it all started, just drop back to Spotify, where you'll find a 5-minute audio introduction to this second series and the whole of the first series of 2020 Coaching Convos. So last week in episode 5, I focused on 3 different terms used both in and outside of the coaching community. And the terms were digging deep, map of the world, and heavy lifting. And by way of offering an alternative perspective, or indeed a different map of the world, I want to start this week's podcast with some comment on each phrase from Olufemi Xavier of Coach With Me Olufemi, who very kindly took time to share his reflections from his coaching practice. So about the phrase digging deep, Olufemi says, digging deep is a phrase that I often use around exercise. When someone feels like there's nothing left in the tank, I might tell them to dig deeper to reach those hidden reserves of strength. It's quite a positive phrase to me and indicates the long-term gain after the temporary pain. He says map of the world isn't one he's necessarily using unless he's making a point about perception and subjectivity. Olufemi says, this is quite a cerebral meta conversation to me though, so I don't find myself using it in coaching. And lastly, heavy lifting, a phrase that he finds is very commonly used. And he says people often use it to give some indication of the weight of effort and maybe referring to their desire to share that effort with someone else or even feeling overloaded. So thanks to Olufemi. And to the main subject matter for this week. So if you've been following this review of coaching language and jargon and its impact on accessibility of coaching for clients, you might remember that in one of the earlier episodes, I drew a distinction between 2 perspectives. Firstly, that language content in itself matters, which then means that coaches need to pay attention to mutual sense-making and meaning between the coach and their clients. So in the language and the words used. So that's one perspective, the language. And the second perspective, language processes. So that's the way that our minds process information that is communicated in order to sense make. And so this matters over, or at least as well as, the language content. So we've got language content and language process. And it's the second perspective that I want to focus on in this episode. So this perspective suggests that it's not important that the coach checks the mutuality of understanding between them and the client. So asking for definitions, asking about meaning of language. Instead, it suggests that it's enough to trust the client's conscious and subconscious processing capabilities and capacity to make whatever sense and meaning is available to the client at the time. And that meaning might be shared by the client, it might not be shared. It might be spoken out loud or it might not. Before I trained in NLP or neuro-linguistic programming techniques, I had some hesitation or indeed even anxiety about the way in which NLP exercises are able to communicate beyond conscious thinking. So to kind of breach the conscious mind's gatekeeping, to allow the subconscious to process and bring information into the conscious mind. I was kind of concerned that in my coaching practice, the client might be relinquishing control without really actively and consciously giving permission. So how could I be sure that the client could safely respond to the techniques within their own capacity to manage their own thoughts and feelings and ideas that might emerge as a result of the NLP technique? Having personally experienced NLP practice as a client many times, and I've benefited hugely from the effects, I now trust my own subconscious, and in fact each of our subconscious minds, to safely manage what becomes conscious, what emerges into our thinking minds or cognition. So yes, I trust the subconscious mind to allow only that which I have the capacity to be responsible for when it comes to my consciousness. So I believe our subconscious mind kind of knows what our conscious mind can handle. And I believe through my experience that the subconscious and conscious minds are partners working together for the good of my and your living and being. After all, most of what happens in my body and brain is not in my consciousness. Most of my functioning happens automatically without my having to be aware of it, to think it through, or to feel it. Of course, I can bring some of my bodily functioning to my conscious awareness, but it's not necessary as a prerequisite to function. It works to my benefit and it works to my good. So why not trust the subconscious to function to my good in its relationship with my conscious mind? As I said earlier, I've experienced some really powerful and emotional responses to NLP techniques and other exercises that communicate with the subconscious mind. And yet at no time have I experienced a response that left me feeling overwhelmed or out of control. Instead, with each experience came new information to the benefit of my conscious understanding, my realization, if you like. It's like the subconscious mind kind of says, okay, so you're asking yourself about this particular aspect of your being. Here's something that if you bring it into your conscious awareness and take some time to integrate it with the other conscious thoughts and ideas and feelings that you have, could be of benefit to you. So in relation to language, there's a particular perspective in NLP, in hypnosis, in some other coaching practices, and in the use of metaphor that deliberately uses what's called artfully vague language, and sometimes in a deliberately challenging or potentially confusing question structure. And this can nudge and enable deeper thinking about options and possibilities that might occur to a client at a subconscious level, and which we can know little about until we're thinking about it, so until it becomes a cognitive or conscious thought. This week I've been really enjoying attending Pam Rigdon's Unstuck webinar sessions. She's been sharing some training around a process that she's developed to enable coaches to support clients in quicker and deeper ways to achieve the change that they want. It's a combination between coaching and NLP practice. The first step in her process, unsurprisingly, is about building rapport, and she proposes using the second position, which, put really simply, isn't a ballet position, but is about immersing ourselves in the other person's map of the world, so that we can really enable the client to feel seen and heard and felt, as well as understood, so appealing to all sensory preferences. From my perspective, this is a truly skilled practice for a coach to be able to ask questions about the client's situation that brings the coach closer to being in the client's shoes, really stepping into their model of the world, known as a phrase, temporarily and by choice, in order to get a greater sense of the situation that the client is experiencing. And then, really importantly, of course, stepping out again, because we know empaths can quickly burn out. Beyond the generic and somewhat vague questions, I think this is a great example of a non-language or process approach to building mutual connection and non-judgmental understanding. So do check out Pam Rigdon's website, www.nlpforcoaches.com, and look up perceptual positions exercises online if you want more information. That's perceptual positions. So back to artfully vague language. Yes, it's the use of deliberately unclear or ambiguous words and phrases to convey an idea without really committing to specific detail. And one of the many things it does for listeners and the speaker is that it allows for multiple interpretations. It softens the impact of a statement, and it's also a way of appealing to a broader audience without alienating any particular group, especially if you're looking to appeal to individual sensory preferences. So by being deliberately open-ended, you can suggest meaning without being pinned down to precise facts or commitments, and without really knowing which of those meanings individuals are picking up on. Just watch and listen to politicians' frequent use of this. In life coaching conversations, though, artfully vague language can be a really powerful tool to encourage clients to explore their own thoughts and their feelings and solutions without feeling pressured and without feeling confined to specific answers. And also without feeling that there's that one special answer that perhaps the coach knows and is waiting for the client to reach. So how does it work? So as I described earlier, when artfully vague language is used, it creates this kind of interaction between the subconscious and the conscious minds that encourages deeper processing and self-reflection and personal interpretation. That personal interpretation is really important. So here's what happens. So we know that the conscious mind is responsible for and really loves logical thinking and decision making. And if we present the conscious mind with language that's intentionally open-ended or ambiguous, the vagueness of it prompts the conscious mind to engage in a kind of problem-solving or meaning-making search. And so the person actively thinks about how the language applies to their situation. The subconscious mind, however, stores emotions, memories, habits, and it kind of starts working behind the scenes to fill the gaps that are left by the vague language. The language is really non-specific, and so the subconscious mind searches for and draws on our past experiences, our beliefs, our feelings, to try and interpret the message or the communication in a way that feels personally relevant. So the subconscious mind is more receptive to and loves suggestion, metaphor, symbolism. So it can subtly influence or evoke emotional response without getting that resistance from the conscious mind that might ordinarily occur. Vague language sometimes leads to a kind of a form of projection, so where the listener assigns their own meaning or context to the words. And so this does allow the listener or the individual to make the conversation deeply personal. So their subconscious mind interprets the vagueness in a way that aligns with their inner thoughts or desires or unresolved conflicts. So as a result, we feel more engaged and we're bringing more of our personal interpretations into the process. When language is too direct or too specific, we or the subconscious mind can become defensive, especially if the message challenges our existing beliefs and behaviours that we've built up over time through generalisation. What artfully vague language does is softens that defensiveness because it offers a suggestion rather than instruction or command. So ambiguity of vague language is less threatening and challenging, and it allows the subconscious to explore the idea more freely without the conscious mind providing resistance or pushing back. So this interaction between the subconscious and the conscious mind creates a bit of space for creative thinking. It encourages the individual to consider possibilities and connections that might not be otherwise immediately obvious. So it bypasses the sort of rigidity and the pattern forming of conscious mind, and it provides, through the subconscious mind, more innovative or emotionally resonant solutions to the problems. So there are a number of ways in which the approach can be used in coaching conversations. Firstly, it can invite the client to reflect and interpret the meaning in a way that resonates with their unique experience. So this kind of taps back into our map of the world idea again. So, for example, a coach might ask, what does success feel like to you? Instead of providing a specific definition of success, it's kind of allowing the client not just to define it for themselves, but to apply experience, emotion, beliefs to that definition. Vague language can inspire clients also to think beyond their fixed solutions, be more creative and open-minded. So if you say things like, what possibilities can you imagine? What might happen if you approach this differently? It encourages a range of ideas without being limited by specific predetermined options. It can also reduce resistance. So when clients are stuck or resistant, some approaches can feel quite overwhelming or triggering. Vague language kind of softens a conversation and it gives the client space to approach the change at their own pace. So if we say, for example, you might start to notice some shifts in how you feel about this, it's far less confrontational than saying, what would happen if you change your mindset? Artfully vague statements can subtly place the responsibility for insights and actions on the client, which is really where those insights and actions should sit. So what do you think is possible, or where do you see opportunities, empowers that person to be the creator of their own solutions rather than relying on the coach to provide their answers. AI summarizes artfully vague language in coaching in this way. By being intentionally vague in a supportive and strategic way, life coaches can help clients take ownership of their journey, find their own answers, and expand their thinking. In summary, artfully vague language stimulates the conscious mind to search for meaning while allowing the subconscious to contribute personalized interpretations and insights. This creates a dynamic where the individual's open to new ideas and deeper self-awareness, blending conscious thought with subconscious intuition. That's a great relationship between subconscious and conscious mind. And so that's it for this week. Thanks for watching and listening to the end of this episode, which has focused largely on language process in coaching and NLP, in fact. Next week, I'll be heading closer to the exit of that labyrinth of coaching language, and I can kind of see two paths converging, I think. But I've just got one question before I go. So this is for coach and client alike. What is your experience of the use of vague language? Oh, of course, just one other question too. What else? What else has this episode left you pondering? Do let me know. So please share this episode and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And tell me what you want to hear more about in 2020 Coaching Convos, Passionately Curious, with me, Julie Crabb. Till next time.